Okay, so I wanted to try doing a little bit of a demo here on a GitHub project I've been working on. I'm going to put this on my retro channel, but I'm going to do another video or two on this on my Modern Democracy channel as well to cover the large language model side of things. But basically what I've been trying to do is to see what I can get a large language model to generate as far as code quality is concerned. My recent work experience, I was doing some Esri development, and I did find for any sort of mainstream popular API, whether you're talking about Esri's ArcGIS or Microsoft Office 365, or I said any sort of big popular API that's probably been had its documentation scraped for large language model training. You can, as long as you are familiar with the library that you're trying to get it to generate code for, I've had pretty good success even with ChatGPT. But ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude from Anthropic all do quite a good job of generating code on APIs that are, like I said, well-known, popular, and current. What this exercise was for me was to see, can I get it to generate accurate code for a language that it doesn't know anything about, and in fact knows a lot about very, very similar languages that can actually cause issues with the type of code that it generates. So my target for this project is the Tandy Colour Computer 3, or the Coco 3, and Nitro OS 9 Ease of Use edition. But Nitro, actually, the stuff that I've been doing right now is Nitro OS 9. I don't even think it's EOU specific right now, but it's been a bit of a process, and I'm trying to figure out how to get this process working. It's been a little bit of trial and error. But what I started with, I'll put a link to this GitHub project here when I post this online, so you can go and check out this repository yourself. Right now, it's still very much a work in progress. It's actually kind of a couple of things. So I'm using MAME as my emulation environment to be able to emulate the Coco 3. Anybody who's not familiar with retro computers, the Tandy Colour Computer line was an 8-bit line of computers. First, I think the Coco 1 came out around 1980. So, a couple of years after the big 3 came out in 77, that's the Atari 8, no, not the Atari, but the Commodore PET, the TRS-80 from Radio Shack, which was a different computer platform, and the Apple II from Apple. Then there was the Atari 8-bit came out in 79, and then the Tandy Coco came out to kind of replace the old TRS-80 for the home computer anyway, in around 1980. And the Coco 3 came out a few years, I think 85, 86, something like that. Anyway, so it's a Motorola 6809 processor. It's got, so the Nitro OS 9 was a sort of an operating system that sat on top of the Coco, best for the Coco 3, but there was a version level 1 for the Coco 1 and 2. And it's basically a lot more of a elaborate operating system than sort of the basic one that basic language based one that for Color Computer Basic that came with the computer. I'm still learning about Nitro OS 9 and Coco 3. I was a Coco 2 user. My dad bought one when I was a little kid, and that's one of the first computers I learned to program on. But with Nitro OS 9 came a updated version of Basic called Basic09. And Basic09 has a bunch of additional features, and NitroOS 9 itself does as well. So it has a lot of file management. It's starting to look very POSIX-like, which is basically a sort of a Unixy type of standard. Unix is a POSIX. I think, if I remember correctly, Unix is a POSIX compatible language. But anyway, I think I'll have to brush up on that to give it a little more detail. But anyway, the NitroOS 9 operating system, like I said, comes with Basic09. It has a now, Basic as a programming language was an early language intended to teach people who don't know anything about programming. There's a fair bit of limitations to the way Basic works. It's meant to be very simple, so modern day conveniences like objects or even just structs that are outside of a function or a procedure in Basic's language don't exist. Basic09 does have a type, which is basically a struct type thing, if you're familiar with C. But it's limited to the scope of the procedure in which it's declared. So, like I said, there's still a fair bit of limitations to what you can do with it, but it's a lot more advanced than what you can do with Basic on pretty much any other computer, including Color Computer Basic on the Cocoa. And anyway, I'm sort of using this as both an excuse to learn, because I'd like to develop applications for the Cocoa. As like I said, it was kind of my childhood computer, I had the MC10 before that, but also a Radio Shack product. And so it's been a dream of mine to come back and actually develop some applications for it. But as I've been studying large language models and using them in both personal and professional uses in the last few years, I've become very comfortable with using it as a generator of code. The big part is when I look at a large language model, I think of it more as a junior programmer. So I've got senior level skills. I know how to spec out a project and define the needs of a specific block of code I want to write. And so I'm trying to create essentially a training information. So a training document or two that can give it an understanding of what the Basic09 language is, what the different procedures, or the built-in procedures that you can call, the syntax of the language, and I'm trying to see, can I get it to create, like I said, the ultimate goal is to have it generate perfect code. In order to get to that, I probably would have to start training a model using an API. And these initial attempts are more, I want to kind of do this in a way that's easy for anybody to kind of follow along. So what I'm using is the web interfaces for, and for this particular project, I've been using ChatGPT, I've been using Google Gemini, and I've been using Claude, Anthropic's Claude. So let me go over kind of what the structure of this project is. I've got a couple of scripts here. So this is I've got a Unix, I've got Ubuntu running on my Windows machine as WSL 2, but as a sub operating system essentially. And inside of that, I've got some shell scripts that I've created for this GitHub project that do a couple of essentially what I'm trying to do is set up a script that will create a new project folder for me. This is, like I said, still a working project. It creates a bunch of sort of subfolders and whatnot, which you can see on this folder, NitroOS 9 examples, that I've got a version of that shown up here. So I've got in a source file, I've got a bunch of basic source files. Most of the ones .bas are ones that most of this is stuff that I've copied from documents, like the NitroOS 9 Microware documentation for Basic, NitroOS 9 and Basic. that are available on the Color Computer Archive. I think the Internet Archive also has copies of them. And then this is some code that I got generated that I think I'm still working through. But this one here is the one I want to kind of draw your attention to. So this basic reference B09 file, I've started calling it B09 because I just want to distinguish it from .bas is kind of a generic basic. This is something I just want to use an extension that sort of says this is Basic09. So I can handle it with some scripting, both on my build environment and maybe even within NitroOS 9 long term. But anyway, so short term, what I've got here is this Basic09 reference. This procedure has a README that sort of talks about all the different functions that are created, and then there's a big list of procedures. Most of them, the first few are related to this file manager, which is sort of the top level that has a bunch of helper procedures that it calls for, like displaying the screen menu, creating a file, reading a file, and listing a directory. And then there's also some other one-off utility helpers. Let me show you how I got here. So if I go to... actually, no, let me come back here for a second. If I go to Docs, I've checked in a few different documents that I'm kind of working on here, but this is the one I'm going to draw your attention to. This is a Markdown formatted document that is essentially a converted version of the scanned PDF that's on the Cocoa Archive. And in here, it sort of goes through Basic09 programming, but it also goes in through, there's a line editor, a Basic09 line editor built into NitroOS 9, and so system mode, edit mode, execution mode, debug mode, that's all dealing with that. This part in particular, data types, expressions, program statements, and structure, this is the part that kind of defines the capabilities of NitroOS 9, a base NitroOS 9. Like I said, EOU, NitroOS 9 EOU, or Ease of Use, is a separate project that's building on top of this that adds in graphic shells and a whole bunch of, there's graphics libraries for doing drawing on screen and changing, it's got a whole lot of add-on stuff, and I'm not getting to that right now. My focus is right now on just sort of doing something a little more, for this particular project, doing something a little more command liney, something that's just print lines and that sort of stuff. Very, very text-based and basic. And so what I did, let me go to Claude here and go to, I think this was the one that I did. Yeah. So actually, I may have done this in Gemini originally. Actually, before I get into the depths of this, when I talk about the three large language models and what I use them for. So ChatGPT is kind of my go-to. That's the one I do most of my large language model development, testing, and exploration. Google Gemini I started using for, the big difference between the two is Gemini currently has a much larger context window. And the context window essentially defines the length of a conversation you can have. It also defines the size of documents or files that you want to upload to it. So actually, if I go to my Gemini, no thanks. Oh, that's interesting. It just released Pro today, it looks like, or in the last couple of days. Anyway, I'll come back to that. But yeah, so I think PDF do clean up. This is it here. This is where I started. So basically, I started by uploading my cleaned up Markdown document, and then I pasted it in here to have it do some cleanup. So again, the reason why I used Google Gemini for this type of work is because this document is quite a few pages. I think it's something like, I think it's less than 100, but it's definitely up in the 60s, 70s, 80s pages at least. Which you can start to run into issues with ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude with a document that large. It may not accept it because it might be too large for the context window, whereas Gemini has, I think, about 4 times the context window size. So that's what I use Gemini for, is for doing large document manipulation and processing. So if I've got a large document, it's a 100-page document or something that I want to have it sort of pour over and then ask it questions, Gemini seems to be the fit for that right now. Claude's Anthropic, on the other hand, seems to be the leader right now for source code generation, and it's definitely been the one that's been the best sort of zero, or I've gotten the best results as a one-off query. So basically, I use Gemini to give me this document, clean it all up, and I've made some modifications to it since. Then I took a Basic09 reference only, so I took only the chapters that were Basic09. Although this one, is this? Yeah, I think. Oh, this still has the appendices too. So I made a shorter version of this because I think Claude didn't like this with the just the basic language and the appendices. So I took the appendices out when I did get to Claude eventually. But let me show you what I did. This is right. I did start in Google Gemini. Oh, okay, interesting. And I think the reason why I switched to Claude is because I wasn't too happy with the results that I got here initially. Like I said, I'm still experimenting with this, and you might be able to get similar results with Gemini or even ChatGPT. This is just kind of where I'm sitting at today, as of August 6th, 2025. So basically, I gave it the basic only reference to Gemini and said, using this attached manual, revise this system prompt to accurately reflect proper Basic09, including reserved word and syntax. Okay, so then I got a revised system prompt here. Oh, I had some. Oh, okay, yeah. So I got ChatGPT. Sorry, it's been a while since I attached this. I'm kind of refreshing my brain. But basically, I got ChatGPT to generate a system prompt. So you're an expert developer specialized in Basic09 programming for the Tandy Colour Computer series, specifically targeted to OS 9 EOU on the Cocoa 3. Your output must strictly conform to the syntax, structure, and runtime limitations of Basic09 as implemented in Nitro OS 9 EOU. Do not incorporate syntax, keywords, or semantics from other basic dialects. So no QBasic, no AppleSoft, no GW Basic. Assume a Motorola 6809 CPU and OS 9 operating system environment. Where necessary, clarify whether functionality targets level 1 for Cocoa 1 or 2 or level 2 for Cocoa 3. Always specify dependencies, require modules, and system constraints. Code must be valid for use in the OS 9 shell or Basic09 interactive compiler. Always prefer modular design using procwork. Yeah. So I think this was generated by ChatGPT. When I asked it for a system prompt that would be, I could tell a model that it's an expert developer and I want it to generate good quality code. So, but again, this is kind of one of the things that I found, like I said, because there are a lot of more popular basics that lasted a lot longer. So QBasic and GW Basic were both MS-DOS and then Windows basic implementations. AppleSoft Basic would have been on the Mac, I think, and maybe the Apple II. And of course, Visual Basic was the one that Microsoft, built an empire on in the 90s, and slowly gave way to things like C# in the later decades. But again, those languages they're all based off of the original Basic language, but a lot of these have added extra functionality, changed terminology, so things like proc instead of procedures, they've shortened terms, that sort of stuff. And so this is what I was getting from ChatGPT, and so I decided I wanted something that was going to give me a prompt that was using Basic09 terminology. So that's where I took the reference document, which is the Basic09 reference document, and this prompt that was from ChatGPT, and in Gemini I said, give me a better system prompt. And so this is the one that it gave me. You are an expert designer here. Basic09 programming. So again, very, very similar here. But it says where necessary. Okay, always at specified dependencies require modules the system creates. So use of run, procedure, param. So see now it's using proper Basic09 reserve words. So and capitalizing them as well. And again, using the colon equals as opposed to equals. Include comments, runtime execution. If using system calls and device drivers referred to official Microware 9. Okay. Anyway, it seemed to be okay. Then I said, using this revised system prompt, generate a sample procedure that demonstrates the full range of Basic09 syntax. And this gave me something that wasn't all that great. But having this system prompt, I then switched over to Claude. This is where I took that basic reference and took out the appendices. I'll try and get that checked into my repo so it's up there as well. But I just stripped out the appendices at the end of the MD that is on there right now and used that. And then I gave it that system prompt that I got from Gemini. Again, I think this is exactly one for one from what was Gemini. I don't think I changed it. And then I asked it, so now it just responded saying, okay, it read it, and then here's the stuff that it pulled out of the document that it was going to refer to. And then this is where I got into the really interesting stuff. I'd like a small sample procedure that demonstrates the desired output. I wish to use this sample code as a template document provided to a model to allow it to strictly adhere to acceptable coding standards for this target platform when generating code. And that's where it generated this document for me. Now, there were already some immediate issues with this original result. For one, you can't have comments. Well, one, you can't have a multi-line comment like this in Basic09. You also can't have comments outside of procedures. So this is all sorts of illegal. In here, what were some of the big ones here? One, so line numbers need to follow sequential, like a higher line numbers declared. Not all, in Basic09, this is a big difference from sort of the earlier basics. All earlier basics, I think, pretty much, you had to give a line number for every line of code that you had. So that's where you get these, you'd start at 10 or 100 or whatever, and you increment it by 10 or 1 if you wanted to. But every line had to have a number. With Basic09, you don't have to number lines unless you need them as essentially a point for other code to reference when they want, if you're trying to do sort of application routing. So in this case, what this does is it displays our screen here. So this is basically what gets printed on the screen. It gives you a couple of different options, and then it gets into this loop. And in the loop, it asks for an input choice. And then if you press 1, 2, 3, or 4, it'll go to 100, 200, 300, and 400. So 100 creates a file, 200 reads a file, 300 lists a directory, 400 exits. But go to 50, 50 comes after 400. So this was another problem. It wasn't generating lines in, so that the lines that came after were higher than the ones that came before. And then there's error handling in here. So it did do error handling, which was nice. It also created helper procs that are then called. So this is how you call a proc within Basic09. You run it, essentially. And then we have a create file. In here, the big one was if should have an end if afterwards, and there was no end if generated on this one or on this one. Also, another issue was path, or no, file name, or no, what was path, I think. Anyway, I think it was, maybe it was file name. Anyway, it was having an error with the create, and I think it was because file name wasn't dimmed. So, anyway, like I said, there were a few things, but despite there being a few pretty critical errors and that the code wouldn't work, and then there were also some issues down here too. Again, more comments here, comments down here that don't belong outside of a procedure. And there were a couple of bugs in some of these others. It gave me a couple of extra functions. So this binary IO demo writes out to a file. Optimization demo just does some numerical stuff. I'm not actually sure how useful that one is, but and then data structure demo does just works with type a little bit. Again, there might be a little bit of redundancy, but overall, it actually gave me a pretty nice first stab at generating code, and it did it based off of that helpful reference document. If I had not given it this reference document, I would not have gotten anywhere close to Basic09 syntax in this basic language that it was generating for me. So that was a big key. Once I got that going, I would then go here. Yeah. So now I think I ran out of the other thing, because I was dealing with such a large document. I can't have a very long conversation with Claude. Again, Claude has this fairly similar context window to ChatGPT, I think. So, like I said, Gemini is great for large documents. Claude and ChatGPT, not necessarily so much so, but because I'm trying to shrink my content down for sort of training it, I got something that actually gave me a workable solution. But then, like I said, once I ran out of space, and I think if I go back to that other conversation... oh no, sometimes it'll say you've run out of space, and I think maybe that's not always showing up, but either way. So then what I did was I pasted in the generated code and said it's an original source generated for a Basic09 module demonstrating NitroOS 9 Basic09 functionality. It contains updated code. Oh, right. So the reference.txt contains the updated code, remove syntax errors, turn underscores to camel case into variable, to change reserved name attributes, type, fixed line numbers. Okay, yeah. Oh no, so this is the wrong conversation. This is after I'd already got it working. So maybe I did get further down here than I was thinking. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is where I got to it. Sorry for the running around here. So that means that this one might have it. Yeah, there we go. This conversation reaches maximum length. That's why I switched conversations, because I started getting that error on this one. So that's where I got to this line. So now I gave it the source code that it generated the first time, and then what I did was I asked for some updates. So this was me sort of working through the process of fixing the obvious stuff and then going back and finding what the next errors were and fixing those. But a lot of my intention was again, one of my main objectives for this project was to write as little code as possible myself. If I can get the model to make the changes that I want, that's ideal. And again, if I can get it to generate perfect code right off the bat, even better. So what I found at the start, like I said, where comments must reside within procedure blocks. Trailing line comments must start with a /. So Basic09 has two comment notations. You can do REM capitals, or you can do parentheses star. You don't necessarily need to close it with a star parentheses at the end of the line, but it makes it look a little nicer. But you can't add comments at the end of an expression, so this go to 50 line, you can't do that without putting this / on here. And so that's one of the other bugs that it did in the original run, was that it put comments outside of procedures, and then it put some comments at the end of lines without this / to escape it, essentially. So then I got it to fix those two things and told me what it did. And then I said, I'm getting this error. And this took me a while to figure it out. And I think it told me the wrong thing. This was not the problem. What it says here is not correct. Like I said, I believe the problem was that I didn't initialize file name. So I think at this point, I did fix the code myself. I had it running inside of the Coco 3 emulator environment and just tried to figure out what the actual errors were. So then, this is where I got to. So after I got to that point, this is what the final result was. So all that comment got put into a README procedure that sort of talks about what it is and how to call it for each of the functions that are in this module. Then the file manager comes along, and again, so that you can see here, line 500 now. So now I changed that line number, and got it up and running. And then create file. Yeah, there you see dim. I didn't have a dim for the file name, so I added that in, and all of a sudden that error that I was getting before went away around. That was complaining about this line here. Basically because file name wasn't properly defined ahead of that call or reference to it. And the same problem on the README side. And then I think there were some other bugs with a couple of these. Oh, these may have been the end ifs. See here, you can see there's an end if added here, and there's probably another one up here. Yeah, that one there got added. I don't remember what the errors. I do believe there was an error or two on these last three functions, but off the top of my head, I can't remember what they are now. Oh, one of them may have been related to this type. Oh, yes, that's what it was. It was using size as a type attribute name, and it was also using data on this one. And size and data are both reserved words in Basic09. So, you know, not a lot of bugs, and ones that weren't obvious. So that's kind of what I was trying to work in here, was can you, given the original source and the corrected source, can you create a prompt snippet that I can use as instructions for models to not make these mistakes again? And that's where it came up with this. This isn't exactly perfect. I think there's a couple things in here that aren't necessary or aren't correct. But anyway, that was one of the things I'm trying to work on now, is to refine my input content, my training data, to see if I can eliminate those errors. But when all is said and done, let me fire up my and again, I'll do another video on this, sort of talking about this project and how I have it working, but let me go projects. Oh, no, actually, I think I've already got it there. I'll go Coco Dev, and then yeah, so I've got this shell, and my Coco Dev folder is just a MAME installation, and I've got a startup script that will load MAME with the Coco 3 installed. So that's what's firing up here. Let me go into DOS, which is Nitro OS 9. Basic09 when it catches up to my command. Alright, so now I'm in Basic09, and if I go load, and then it's on my second floppy is where I've been copying code over to. Again, I'm not going to cover that in this video, but I will talk about how I actually build and deploy and test. And then the file is called basic reference .b09. So that's the file that has all this code that I generated properly corrected. And you'll see that it loads up all of our functions. Oh, that's my problem. Ran out of memory. Let me add some memory. And let's try that again. Oh, I wish they had code or command memory on the Basic09 interface. Anyway, basic reference .b09. Okay, let's try this again. Now it should load. Alright, so if I go run README, so it spits out all of our instructions. If I run FILEMGR, this is the big one. So now you can see it says I could either list a directory. So this is going to list my disk drives, my data directory, which is on the DD drive. If I hit enter. Brings me back here. I can also go to read a text file, and let's let's try grays. There we go. So that's the contents of that folder, or that file. Or I could create a file, and it says, let's call it test.txt. .txt. And let's just write one line, and let's go hello world. Okay, now I can go and read that file. Let's go test.txt, and now it's printed out hello world. And same if I do a listing now of the directory, test.txt is at the bottom there. Okay. I won't bother running the other three. They're just simple little demos. They're not as elaborate as that particular application. But like I said, that application was all generated by Claude using my sample training data as a template to follow, and the basic reference. And other than a few small glitches, it ran almost out of the box. Gives me good hope for this as a workflow going forward. Like I said, I'm going to see if I can refine and get it to generate code without those built-in errors. That's sort of my workflow for this next few days, is to try and figure that out. In addition to that, I'm working on a calculator app as sort of my next step, and that is from, I think, this one. Oh, no, actually, I did one before. Is it this, or maybe I did it in Gemini or ChatGPT? Yeah, no, this is it here. Okay, so this is, so now that I kind of got my first stab at a basic code as sort of a reference, I then took that Basic09 reference without the appendix document again and asked it to, because my first attempt at getting it to give me sort of a comprehensive, I wanted to call everything that's available to call within Basic09 within a single source, and it did most of it. It did file, but it didn't do things like there was no trigonometry that was in there, or arithmetic functions. I don't think any of that was in there, for instance. But most of everything else, and you see here, I asked it to sort of categorize stuff. I wanted to so this is my workflow trying to go for the next step was, okay, first let's categorize all of the language into sort of different subsections, and also some options for building a sample application that demonstrates all functionality in a single purpose application. So the other stuff was great for sort of demo and templating, but now what I want to do is develop a full-blown application that exercises everything in Basic09. This is what it started off with. So there's, we start with language around data types, so bytes, integers, okay, complex data structures for types, file I/O for. Oh, here's the sample option. Okay, I thought I was missing something. Claude's a little confusing because it embeds some of its responses inside of documents that are sort of embedded here. It's a little different than the way ChatGPT works, and maybe even Gemini. But okay, so this is what it gave me for sort of sample applications. So one was a scientific calculator with data logging. Another was an inventory management system, a text adventure game engine, data analysis and graphing tool, personal finance manager, laboratory data acquisition system, and it ended up recommending the scientific calculator with data logging, which I'm going to do actually. So some of these others might be kind of interesting to play around with, like maybe a text adventure game engine, but I wanted to start, like I said, with the graphing calculator in particular, where you can draw graphs and charts and do scientific calculation or programmatic calculation or that sort of thing, statistical analysis. It should kick a full, especially with data logging, saving configuration, loading data from file, that sort of stuff. Should be a nice, robust, and hopefully complete reference of the Basic09 language and API in a one-stop shop application. And now my process, but this is going to be a lot longer than in like a template script that I can use to make sure that the model generates good Basic09 code. This is more sort of I want like a big cookbook application that I can then take parts of it and use it for new applications. So like I said, being able to kick all of the tires within Basic09 within a single application will kind of serve that purpose for me. So once it's settled on that scientific calculator, I got to build a specification document for it. And it sort of summarizes it here. And it used underscored. This is another issue with I'm going to go back and change my language here, but you can see in the Microware manual it uses underscores between words and variable names and procedures, and I prefer camel case, so I wanted it to switch that up, and also what was my other issue? Oh, and I also wanted to timeline the most logical implementation of the module. So it updated that spec. So now you can see it's camel case. And, okay, so let's kind of review this quickly. So it's going to be a multi-mode calculator, basic scientific, statistical, and programming, calculation history and session logging, data import, export capabilities, customizable display formats, error handling and recovery, modular extensible design. So it started by defining data types. Again, this is not proper Basic09 syntax. You have to have everything declared on one line. And this isn't using the exception, the backslash anyway. But this is not legal. Again, something to work on. But it does help lay it all out for me. Also defined arrays and collections. We'll have a history of calculation history. It's going to have memory banks for storing data, statistical data set, user constants, so different user variables, and function key definitions. So if you press a function key, what does it do? And then here's the main flow. So it starts in calculator main, it'll initialize the system, loads up the configuration from file, restore a previous session if there's a session that exists, displays a splash screen, and then goes into the main program loop. So here in the main loop, we're going to display the current state, process user input, execute calculations, update history, handle errors, and loop over that. And then if they hit exit, we'll clean up and exit the application. So then it gave me core procedures. So system management, we're going to have an init calculator that'll initialize all the data structures, load config from file, save config to file, back up the session, restore the session. So the backup session is going to fire, I think by default it chose 15 minutes, so every 15 minutes it's going to store backups of the session so that if the application crashes or you quit, you can always restore from there. User interface, there's going to be display the main screen to show the main interface, show a menu, so if you hit a menu F key, it'll give you menu options to get user input to handle user input and validation. Format a number, so given a value and a format, it'll format it out. So for like scientific notation or that sort of thing. Display help, so you give it a topic, it'll display some context-sensitive help. And then calculation is going to parse an expression, so given a string, it'll parse it and tokenize all the expression parts. Evaluate basic, so this will calculate an expression for a basic calculation. It's not basic language, it's basic as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Scientific, so that'll do trigonometry and that sort of stuff, and exponent logs, that sort of thing. Statistical for doing stats calculations, and then programming, and this will do like programmable calculations. Data management, so adding to history, so every time a calculation is added, it'll go to the history, search the history for previous calculations, export it, so you can export your history to file, import data, so import data from file, and clear your history to wipe it all out. Basic calculator mode, so it's going to do integer arithmetic, real arithmetic, string concatenation for expression building, and input validation error handling. It's going to do, like I said, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You can do percentages, memory operations, so add a memory, memory store, memory clear, square root, square functions, sign change. And that's basic. That's it's a basic calculator. Scientific calculator mode will do sine, cosine, tangent, log, expression, exponent, etc. Degrees radian mode switching, so you do handle radian. degrees instead of just degrees. Complex expression evaluation, type conversion functions. So it'll have trigonometric functions, logarithmic exponential functions, power and root functions, constants, hyperbolic functions, factorial and gamma functions. Statistical will do array processing, complex loops for data analysis, mathematical calculations for statistics, file I/O for data import-export. It'll do data entry and editing, descriptive statistics, so mean, median, mode, standard deviation, linear regression, correlation, probability distributions, data visualization. Programming calculator mode, hexadecimal number handling, so, bitwise logical, so logical AND, logical OR, logical XOR, logical NOT. Exclusive OR, base conventions, base conversions, memory address calculations, so number-based conversions, bitwise operations, bit shifting, two's complement, address calculations. This is all sort of programmery number manipulation. And then file manipulation. So configuration file is going to have so again, display format preferences, angle, mode default, memory bank contents, function key definitions, user content, constants, that sort of stuff. Session file, so it'll hold your current state, recent calculation history, statistical data sets, memory contents. History export, so it'll export to CSV, doing columns and properly formatted strings. Data import for the same thing, go the other way. User interface, so it'll display our interface here. So we've got help, mode, mem, hist, export. Menus, our interface would be typing in here, probably up here. I guess that's probably our command line. And this is sort of our what's turned on, that sort of stuff, what modes it's in. Menuing, so so there's our main menus, lets you switch between the different types of calculators, configuration, that sort of thing. Memory menu, I guess that's what these two are supposed to be. Anyway, not exactly clear, but this was a one-shot. I didn't come back and change it. This is exactly what it gave me out of the gate. So I'm not expecting 100%, but this is like 90, 95% for sure, at least. Anyway, so goes through more details on this, including advanced features. And even doing unit testing, which would be interesting. And then implementation phases. So phase 1 is to do the core calculator, then add in scientific, then do data management, then do statistical analysis, then do advanced features. And so this is kind of our file structure, I guess, of the source code. I'm not sure what that's for. And then implementation timeline. So this is sort of what it said as an implementation timeline. It's giving me a couple weeks per phase, essentially. So this is next step. And I've already kind of started on that yesterday. I started here. Let me go back up. So I gave it that specification.markdown document and the basic reference.txt, which is my source code, my working Basic09 source code. So that's my reference text. So using that specification document and the basic reference text as a template for Basic09 code generation, it gave me a phase 1 week 1 foundation and generated a procedure for calculator, including, again, so there's some problems here that get cleaned up, but it gave me a good block of code that I can now, and again, it looks a lot better. And you see our line numberings are fixed now, although it's interesting that it adds 9 numbers above here. The line numbers only matter within the context of the given procedure, but anyway. And then some utilities and some unit tests, which is nice. So again, I don't think this is correct. There's stuff that needs to get fixed. One thing I did do a cursory code review, and these are the things that I found. Like I said, so up here at the top, types need to be on one line, and this was doing multi-line, and the inline commas should be moved. Type scope only exists within the procedure in which it's declared. This is one of the downsides of Basic09. So if you want to use the same type in different procedures, like say you want to pass a type variable across procedures, you have to redeclare that type in any procedure that's going to reference it. And also, variables are only within scope in the procedure. So the other thing that it had was it was inside of here, I think, especially down here in the test code. It was referring to like memory banks and current state, but it wasn't passing them in. It was assuming that it was in scope because it was in scope in another procedure. So that's what I was saying here. So then it did an updated version. And up here, we should see now, yeah, so now type is all on one line, and it added comment lines above to be able to put in the content that was there at the end of each attribute line. And then it also changed with, it added params and it added type declarations, so a duplicate of the types up here in the other functions that are using it as well. And variables as well, I guess, should be getting passed around. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I haven't had a chance to even test this code, but that'll be next video, I guess, is when I get phase 1, or at least the first week code fully tested, fully working, and checked into my repo, and I'll do a follow-up video once that's done. But like I said, it's remarkable how close it actually gets with just having some good, clean template source code to kind of base itself off of, and a nicely, cleanly defined specification of what it is that I want it to build, and sort of there seems to be a good sweet spot where I can get, like I said, 90% of the code written in a couple of seconds, handful of seconds. And then it just requires me to go in and either proofread it and make changes myself, or even better, tell it what it did wrong and get it to correct it. The only downside to that, and this is sort of a general tip if you're trying to use source code and large language models together, is that all of them seem to do, they're not great at only changing the things that you want. So for instance, in this one, I think one of the things that did, so here, let me go back up to let me find that same section on the first one. So you can see here, nope, it's up here. Yeah, here. So you can see these are all called function keys. Let me see, let's go up. Right, so the function keys variable got changed, even though I didn't ask for it, to, oh, actually, hang on, to func keys. But maybe func keys, oh, it's passed in. Okay, no, never mind then. It renamed it, but I was thinking it renamed it everywhere. But maybe Claude's a little better than ChatGPT. Definitely ChatGPT will rewrite, if you give it another thing that I got at ChatGPT to write was HTML for me, and I wanted a nice little HTML demo that kind of showed off the way that you the 6-bit value for color on the color computer. It's different depending on if the display is a composite display versus an RGB display. They use very different codes. And so I wanted an HTML page for my own reference that correctly showed the colors and the bit value of that 6-bit value for color in both composite and RGB formats. And I one-shot it. It got it almost, it did really good job the first time. And it generated the HTML, but some of the JavaScript functions that did the hard work were buggy. And one of the things that I found was if I passed in the full HTML source and got it to change the JavaScript functions, it would also change the HTML. I think all the models are a little bit prone to doing that. So maybe when you're, like if you want to generate a whole bunch of code, as your first attempt, usually your workflow for refining it with the model are to only pass it in the part that you want to refine, and then just copy and paste that and replace the part that you want changed. Maybe you get better results with Claude, and maybe it's not so much of an issue. But like I said, with ChatGPT in particular, I know it seems to be prone to doing that. So a quick tip, if you are trying to do this code generation refining process with a model, it's good to get it to generate a big pile of code up front, but may not be the best choice to pass all that code in if you're only refining a part of it. It might be better to sort of copy out the part that you want refined and say, here's the code, here's the changes I want you to make, give me the response, and then you can manually copy it back in. Of course, if you're using something embedded into your IDE, like Copilot. That may not necessarily be such a thing, but again, my purpose of doing it with this approach, using the web-based interfaces, is to make this workflow as approachable to anybody. You don't need to have a complex IDE. All you need to know is to be able to read code, write code, and have a way to deploy it onto a system you can sort of test it on. Okay, that's enough rambling for today. I'm going to close it off here, but I will be back next time with the initial running code of my calculator app once I get this running. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.